hang on to your heinies because the City of Guyton has hit a new low. They had their city attorney draft me a letter because of something I wrote on my personal Facebook page and put in a video, and then basically directed me to take it down. And when I asked to talk about the entire issue at a city council meeting, they said I couldn't because of the topic I wanted to discuss. You probably remember this video from Facebook about a month ago at this point. In it, I just compared the numbers that were reported by the police department to the city council as they said calls for service were coming in, and I compared those with what Effingham 911 was reporting based on what was initiated by police and then what was initiated by the citizens. I was super thorough on my end. I sent a written request to E911. They responded and clarified to make sure they understood what I wanted. And then when they actually provided me the data, I followed up to make sure I understood what I was looking at, and they confirmed. So check, check, check plus. The whole reason that I had to go through E911 with the county is because on a number of occasions, the City of Guyton has either refused to provide data because they say that it is a security risk, they have over-redacted on it, or they've just provided like bits and pieces of information so that nothing can actually be pieced together. Enter City Attorney Ben Perkins. So last week, I go to my P.O. box and ding, 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 this letter's there. It was sent to me regular mail and certified mail, and I could post it, but it really wouldn't do it justice because you need to hear the whole thing. So it says, Miss Salachi, I write to you in my capacity as city attorney for the City of Guyton. It has come to my attention that you have written on social media and on your website, www.thegeorgiavirtue.com, various inaccurate statements about the Guyton Police Department, including that, quote, the police department was lying about the number of calls/amount of work it reports to council each month, comma, Guyton Police Department has been lying about calls for service, comma, and a series of exclamation points. In the last 3 months alone, Guyton PD has overstated calls for service by 556 calls. After you lodged those accusations, the chief contacted the Effingham County 911 Multi-Agency Call Center, hereinafter referred to as Effingham 911. Effingham 911 investigated and acknowledged in the enclosed correspondence that they had provided inaccurate information regarding calls for service, which information you apparently relied upon to draw the conclusion that the Guyton Police Department was inflating its numbers. Why, yes, Mr. Perkins, I did rely on the numbers from Effingham 911 to draw the conclusion that that is the number of 911 calls that were received by the Effingham 911 call center. Yes, that is a fact. The letter then says, we look forward to receiving your favorable reply. Best regards, Benjamin Perkins. And then he copied Chief Proletic. So it jumped from, you will find out the following, one bullet point, and it says, yo, holler back with something positive. It seems like something's missing from the letter. It made it seem like they were going to list off a bunch of things because he said that there were various inaccurate statements on social media and on the georgiavirtue.com, and then there was one bullet point about a video, and then it ended. So I email him, explain as much, and that the letter doesn't seem to have all of the details, and if it does, that seems incomplete, but I don't hear a reply. In the meantime, I emailed the city manager, Miss Makita Brown, and asked to be placed on the agenda. And she replies with a emphatic absolutely. So there's a few reasons I want to be placed on the agenda. One is to counter the claims and accusations that they made. Second, I will just go to the council directly because I am not going to have this back and forth with a city attorney who gets paid by the hour to the tune of several $100s, which is not usually the norm for a municipality, by the way. But I'm not going to let him just run up the billable hours so that I can tell him why he's wrong. Okay, so it's important to talk about what the actual letter said too, because the meat of it is where this really gets funny. So in the letter from E911 in Effingham, the letter isn't really a correction. It actually doesn't say there was an accurate information provided. It says that response zones for calls for service are determined based on the emergency service number that is assigned. So in Guyton city limits, there are two numbers, 38 and 51. The original reports provided to me, as it says, were based on those numbers. And so their history, their CAD history search does not account for ESN gaps when the calls were not for those numbers. So anytime they went to a call that was not in a number assigned to the city limits of Guyton, it wasn't recorded as such. Makes sense because they're Guyton police officers. So because Effingham 911 is thorough, they do report other information in another software. And so at the request of Chief Berletic, they went and got that information and pulled the information, outside of the boundary lines. It literally says that the majority of the numbers provided to me were comprised of the Guyton Police Department's direct patrol zones and traffic stops at locations between ESN boundary lines. And then they said that they reported the others with this letter. And so they just said, because they're polite, we apologize for any inconvenience and misinformation this discrepancy may have caused for your agency. So now hold on. Mr. Perkins was kind enough to provide me with all of that information. So, as he stated, the numbers for this report do show that they had 471 calls as opposed to 298. But allow me to share with you what kinds of calls they included, right? 911 hang-up calls, direct patrol. Do you know what direct patrol is? Because I do. It means that you're adding more units, whether on foot or in cars, to prevent crime. Like, it's proactive policing. That's the definition by all the law enforcement academies. That's the DOJ definition. That's the Google definition. It just means that you're being present and seen. You're patrolling. You're driving around. Also on here are, when they do follow-up reports, on here are responding to strokes. On here are information only, like when they call or answer and someone just wants information. Every time they ran a GCIC inquiry, those are on here as calls for service. Who knew that running someone's tag was a call for service? Because if they did it because there was a tail light out or because they pulled someone over for some other reason, that is also listed as a call for service. So the fact that they went in here and added on the NCIC GCI inquiry means they're doubling up. So it may be 471 based on this month, but in terms of actual numbers, it ain't even close to 471. Now, the entertaining part is that for the January and February months that they sent me, those numbers still don't match what the chief said. So they sent me a certified letter about 1 out of 3 months, and the numbers, they're telling me that there's various inaccuracies, but the numbers they provided me as how they obtained them from the 911 center, they're not right either. They don't match what the chief said. So if I got numbers from 911 and they don't match the chief, and they got numbers from 911 and they don't match the chief, and the chief got numbers from 911 and they don't match the chief, who is the common denominator here as the dishonest one? Oh, but wait, there's more. My phone rang. Obviously, I didn't answer because I don't know why he would be calling me. If he wants to talk to me, he can send me an email and we can correspond in writing where there's a record. And that's exactly what we did. So Miss Brown replies to me one more time after I thanked her for putting me on the agenda, and she says, "Is there a topic the mayor should add? He's working on the agenda right now." And I said, "Yes, ma'am. I'd like to discuss the City of Guyton." I said that because I don't have to tell them what I want to discuss, and second, because I know that if I mention what I want to discuss, they're not going to let me on the agenda. Of course, that didn't suffice, so the mayor emails me, says the same thing. "I need some clarity about why you want to be on the agenda." Even though they already said they would add me to the agenda, now he wants some clarity to put it on the agenda and says, "Feel free to call me." And I reply and say, I'm concerned about giving you a specific topic because it kind of goes across a couple topics, and I just am concerned that if I give you one thing and I mention another thing, you're going to gavel me out. I'm just super honest. And I said, if we can come to a middle ground, then I'd be happy to fine tune it. If not, then I'm going to need till the morning. So of course that doesn't suffice, per usual. And he tells me, please specify your concerns. And I'm like, all right, buddy, listen here. I don't have to tell you because you've already said you would put me on the agenda. I've gone through the process, and here are 8 case laws that say I don't have to do that because you can't censor me based on content-specific reasons that the Court of Appeals has ruled, the U.S. District Courts have ruled, the Supreme Court has ruled. They've all erred on the side of the First Amendment. When you open the floor, when you open the forum, you've got to let everybody speak, no matter what they want to talk about, even if they want to complain about you. And this joker replies to me and says, you are not on the agenda, and neither is that letter. Public comments are limited to items on the agenda. So now he's taken me off the agenda because he knows I want to talk about the letter. And so he made sure not to put the letter on the agenda, and he made sure not to put me on the agenda as a specific item or a specific line of public comment that wants to talk about the letter. So I can't talk about the letter because it's not on the agenda and I'm not on the agenda, but I can talk about other things, just not the things that are not on the agenda. Now I'm the one who's saying that doesn't suffice, and I reply and say, why? And why can't I speak? And he says, you can speak during public comments in regard to items on the meeting agenda. Okay, so you want me to get up there and just talk about things that don't matter? All right. Or is this a challenge because you want me to find a way to connect my letter to each item on the agenda? That might actually be fun. I mean, the entire point of having a process to ask to be placed on the agenda is so that in the event that somebody wants to discuss something that's not on the agenda, they can. They go through the process ahead of time of making sure that they're placed on the agenda to discuss a specific subject, regardless of whether or not the mayor and council think that topic is prudent to discuss. Brilliant, amazing, totally rogue, right? So I push him and say, why are you not letting me be on the agenda? And he replies to me with this quote from a Minnesota State Board for Community College case, where it says, you're not generally given a right to be heard by public bodies when they're making decisions about policy. And if I'm unhappy, I can contact a council member and see if they'll place me on the agenda. But he can see that I'm backing him in a corner. So he replies with this nonsense about how he was just trying to get clarification and I refused to give it to him. Yet he replied to me and said, you are not on the agenda, nor is your letter. You can talk about other things. So he wrote in writing that that's why he's taking me off the agenda and that's why I'm not allowed to speak. Mistake number 1. Well, your city website under your administration created this document that says the only reason somebody would be barred from speaking and being placed on the agenda after making one of these requests through the formal process is if there were too many people who already signed up. Lucky for me, no one else signed up. Mistake number 2 is how he closed his email, and let me quote it. I would recommend removing the video calling our chief a liar, considering you are in possession of information that he was correct in his reporting. I'm not removing the video. There was nothing inaccurate about what was reported. Nothing. Those numbers came from a reliable agency. Your chief went to the agency and asked for different numbers and then came back and tried to act like that's what should be refuted and that I should issue a retraction. It's not my fault that your police department doesn't know what a call for service is. Not my fault. Not issuing a retraction over it. Should we talk about why Effingham 911 didn't send me contact information about the data being different? Because I feel like if it was wrong, they would have contacted me to let me know it was wrong. But the reality is that the chief prompted a letter based on his request for different information. And my request was based off of information for, as standard law enforcement operations, like the way other agencies do it, the way 911 measures it, literally everybody but Guyton. Here are a few recommendations for you, Russ Deen. First, Don't make recommendations to people about what they should and should not put on their Facebook page when your entire tenure has been plagued by social media gaffes. Here's a spoiler for you. The idea that the police department was inflating their numbers didn't just grow out of thin air. It came from tip after tip after tip from people who listen to the radio and know that your police aren't running 500 calls for service a month. Probably because the sheriff's office and all the other agencies respond to calls just as often as your police department, because you're not 24 hours, because your agency doesn't respond sometimes when they are on the clock. Stop wasting tax dollars sending letters from your city attorney to citizens and people who don't even live in your city because of things they've said on social media. I know for a fact that I am not the only one and not the first one to receive a letter like this. Are you telling me that the City of Guyton has nothing better to do than draft letters about what's going on social media? What about all the calls they're supposedly answering? And if that was an attempt to intimidate me by sending me the certified letter and sending it to my P.O. box instead of just emailing me, which would have obviously been the most economical way, you're going to have to try a little bit harder. I believe this is the part where we insert the quote about sweeping your own stoop before you take a broom to someone else's door. So here we are on year 2.5 of holding the City of Guyton accountable, and it is still consistently, repeatedly, the people who show up with the receipts and can back up their claims, and the City of Guyton that's just lobbing accusations, hurling insults when it works, and saying things like, oh, it's just a gray area, and the worst thing that can happen is we break the law and just go back and fix it. I mean, what the heck? So please, spare us all. Also, your police department does have problems with lying. You have a lieutenant who has been recorded lying multiple times, been caught in multiple lies. You have a chief who has been caught in lies. You have a department as a whole that is inflating numbers to say that directing traffic and driving around and running tag numbers for Lord knows what. God help them. God protect those people. Lay his hands down over the drivers in Guyton. You're saying that those are calls for service. I've thought a lot about how I was going to close this video over the last couple of days since all of this transpired. And then it just came to me. It just popped up when I found this Facebook post from Russ Deen from 2019 in which he said, even if we disagree, we should all be heard. And sometimes if the wind is right and the stars are aligned, maybe we can all be more open to hear the other side. I pray to never be too big to admit when I'm wrong if elected mayor of Guyton. Well, Mayor, I guess you should pray a little harder.